Okay, so today we're diving into something really, really fundamental.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, critical analytic thinking. How we really learn and make sense of like everything around
It's
us.
like the ultimate brain workout, right?
Exactly. And for this deep dive, we've got this gold mine of insights from a gathering back in 2013. 18 top-notch experts are talking education policy, brain science, child development all came together to really try to wrap their heads around this crucial skill.
That's quite the lineup. What were they hoping to achieve? Like, what was their mission?
So their goal was like serious knowledge sharing, real consilience to find that common ground on what critical analytics thinking is and how we can actually help young people develop it.
So not just defining it, but actually figuring out how to, like, make it happen. That's huge.
Exactly. And this isn't just some like theoretical thing. You see this demand for these skills everywhere. Big educational frameworks like the Common Core State Standards, the Next Generation Science Standards, they all emphasize critical thinking and analysis.
Right. It's like front and center in education these days.
But here's the thing, and this is what makes it so interesting, even though everyone agrees it's essential, nailing down a single clear definition and then actually measuring it, well, that's proven to be super tricky.
Okay, so kind of a paradox. We know it's important, but we're not exactly sure what it is or how to measure it. That's a head scratcher for sure.
So back to the basics.
Hmm.
What's the fundamental belief driving all this attention? Like, what is it about critical analytic thinking that makes it so valuable?
So it seems like there's this core idea, right? That when people can really understand the world around them, when they can grapple with complex issues in a deep and flexible way, well, things get better for everyone.
So it's not just about like individual smarts. It has implications for like the whole community, even society.
Exactly. Think about a democracy, right?
Mm.
For it to function well, you need citizens who can look at information, analyze it critically, and then make thoughtful decisions.
All right, it's like the foundation for making good choices as individuals and as a society.
Totally. But, and here's a catch, the material we're looking at suggests there's a gap. Many students today aren't actually mastering these critical analytic skills. There was this study by Urim and Roxa back in 2011. It looked at learning on college campuses and, well, the findings were pretty concerning.
So it's not just about teaching these skills. There's something about how we're learning that needs to shift.
Precisely. And that brings us to this heightened interest we're seeing. We've always talked about critical thinking, but it feels like there's a renewed urgency now.
So what's behind this new wave of attention?
I'd say a few key things. First, there's this growing concern about the downsides of high-stakes testing. Think about it. The pressure to ace these big tests can sometimes push education towards, like, surface-level learning, memorizing facts instead of developing that deeper, more analytical understanding. Alexander and his team have done some really interesting work on how these kinds of tests can even shape our understanding of knowledge itself.
It's like we're prioritizing the what over the how, the content over the process of thinking.
Right. And then on top of that, we have all this exciting stuff happening in cognitive science and neuroscience. Research in these fields is showing just how crucial it is to nurture these abilities in young people. Studies like the ones by Farah in 2010 and Mackey and his colleagues in 2011 are revealing how things like poverty can have a real impact on brain development, which in turn affects critical thinking.
So understanding the brain is becoming more and more central to how we approach education.
Absolutely. But it's not just about what's going on inside our heads. The research is also showing how powerful our social interactions are. With parents, teachers, friends, all of those play a huge role in developing these higher level thinking skills.
So like those early environments where kids are encouraged to be curious, to ask why, to explore, those are all laying the foundation.
Exactly. And researchers like Ramani and Rowe have really highlighted how essential those early interactions are. And that extends to what happens in the classroom, too. The quality of discussions, how teachers guide those discussions, that all matters.
Right. So it's not just about getting the right answer, but about how you arrive at it.
Exactly. That's what Murphy and his colleagues found in their 2009 study. When teachers really skillfully guide students to consider different perspectives, to back up their claims with evidence, it makes a difference.
Okay, so we've got the brain stuff, the social stuff, and the way learning is actually happening in the classroom. Anything else?
Oh yeah, the overall atmosphere of the classroom, the school, like the sociocultural climate that plays a role too. And then of course there's the whole motivation piece.
Right, because even with the best environment, if a student isn't motivated.
Exactly. And we're not just talking about like wanting good grades. It's about their goals, their beliefs about their own potential, their genuine desire to learn. Researchers like Pentrich, Wenzel, and Wigfield have done some fascinating work in this area. It's not just a cold, purely cognitive process.
So it's really multifaceted.
Totally. And there's another point that's really important, especially in terms of equity. Sometimes, when we focus heavily on basic skills for students who are struggling or for those learning English as a second language, we might unintentionally limit their opportunities to engage in this kind of thinking.
And that's a problem because
Because engaging in critical analytic thinking could actually be what helps them progress. Researchers like Boulder and Wang have pointed to this tension. It's this balancing act, right? We need to make sure that all learners have the chance to develop these skills, not just some.
Okay, so we've got brain development, social dynamics, motivation, classroom environments, and this whole equity piece. It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, it's complex. Which is exactly why this gathering of experts back in 2013 was so interesting. They were trying to find that common ground amidst all these different perspectives. They called it a quest for consilience.
Consilience, what does that even mean?
So it's like this striving for unity and knowledge, bringing together these different fields to see where they overlap, to find those shared principles, and ultimately to build a more unified understanding.
So it's about bridging those gaps between different ways of looking at things.
Exactly. And they came up with some really interesting shared claims, key points they all agreed on.
Okay, let's hear them. What were some of the most insightful ones?
Well, one fundamental claim was that critical analytic thinking always rests on credible evidence.
Makes sense. But what counts as credible evidence? That's not always clear-cut, is it?
Right, and that's exactly what they pointed out. What's considered credible can change depending on the task, the situation, even the specific field of knowledge. It's not always black and white.
Like, what's considered credible in a scientific experiment might be totally different from what's considered credible in a history paper or a literary analysis.
Exactly. Another key point. Critical analytic thinking takes real effort. It's not automatic. You have to use your brain power.
No gain.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, sort of. They acknowledge that this kind of thinking has both costs. It takes time, it can be mentally tiring, but it also leads to some serious benefits, like deeper understanding and better decision-making. Think about those times you've really wrestled with a problem. It's draining, but also satisfying when you have that breakthrough.
So it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Mental effort for better outcomes. What else struck you?
There's this one that's super interesting for anyone working with younger kids. They agreed that young children can think critically.
Really? We often think of critical thinking as something that develops later on.
Right. But they emphasize that, with the right conditions, even young children can engage in this kind of thinking. It challenges that assumption that it's just for older students or adults, and it highlights the importance of creating those supportive environments early on.
So we can start nurturing these skills much earlier than we might think. What about as we get older?
Well, they also agreed that this kind of thinking is absolutely essential for becoming an expert in any field. The more you learn about a subject, the more you need those skills to analyze, evaluate, and synthesize information. It's like those critical thinking muscles get stronger the more you use them as you gain expertise.
I like that analogy, critical thinking muscles.
Right. And then they made this broader point about how important it is for society as a whole. A society where people can engage in thoughtful debate, make informed decisions. That's a society that's going to be more successful and more resilient. It ties back to that idea of a functioning democracy.
Absolutely. So how do we actually make sure these skills develop?
They agreed that it's a complex mix of factors: cognitive skills, social interactions, motivation, brain development, and the types of experiences we have. It's not just one thing. It's all of these pieces working together.
That's like this intricate web of influences.
Totally. But here's the empowering part. They also believed that we can intentionally create environments that support the development of critical analytic thinking. It's not just something you're born with. We can foster it through the right experiences and the right learning environments.
Okay, so it's not just nature, it's nurture too. What about who does this thinking?
Right. Well, they also recognize that it can happen both individually and collectively. Think about when you're struggling with a problem on your own. That's individual critical analytic thinking in action. But then think about a really productive team meeting where everyone's bouncing ideas off each other, analyzing different options. That's the collective aspect.
I can see how both of those modes would really strengthen those thinking skills.
Absolutely. And finally, there was this strong agreement that this process of critical analytic thinking should be woven into education for all learners. They really emphasize that these aren't just skills for the academically gifted. They're essential for everyone. It's about equipping all students to navigate the complexities of the world.
So it's not about creating an elite group of critical thinkers. It's about empowering everyone.
Precisely.
Okay, those shared claims give us a lot to think about. Now, the article also mentions a process model for this kind of thinking. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So this model, and I think Robert Croninger initially put this forward, it's like a visual map. It tries to show all the different parts involved in critical analytic thinking and how they connect. You've got the task you're working on, your prior knowledge, your values, the evidence you have access to, those are all inputs,
Yeah.
right? And then you've got these mental processes like deliberation, evaluating information, and integrating new knowledge.
So it's like a recipe, almost.
Well, kind of.
Yeah, kind of.
But it's dynamic. It emphasizes that these components are constantly interacting, influencing each other.
Yeah.
And then it also takes into account things like motivation and whether you're working alone or with others.
So it's not a linear step-by-step process. It's more like a messy, interactive web.
Right. And that makes sense, right? Thinking isn't always neat and tidy.
Definitely not. The article also emphasizes this interdisciplinary approach. They had scholars from all these different fields working together. Why was that so important?
Because each field has its own unique lens, its own tools for understanding things. So bringing together developmental psychologists, cognitive scientists, neuroscientists, educational policy experts, it allows you to build this much richer and more complete picture. You get a 360-degree view of what critical analytic thinking really is and how it works.
It's like looking at a puzzle from all sides instead of just one.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And you get these really interesting collaborations like Burns, who studies cognitive development, teamed up with Dunbar, a cognitive scientist, to explore the nature of critical analytic thinking and how it evolves as we grow. And then you have Bolger and his team. They brought together counseling psychology, neuroscience, and second language acquisition to look at how individual differences influence this kind of thinking.
So blending different areas of expertise to get these fresh insights, that's cool.
Yeah, and the special issue that came out of this gathering featured all these collaborative articles. They really emphasized concise overviews, drawing on a wide range of research, but always connecting back to those shared claims we talked about, or to that process model.
So it's like weaving a tapestry, bringing all these different threads together to form a bigger picture.
Precisely. And they had some really interesting pairings, like Brown and her team. They looked at how we assess critical analytic thinking, especially in the context of high-stakes testing and those big national policies like the Common Core. And then Mealy and Wigfield, with their background in educational and social psychology, dug into this complex relationship between motivation and critical analytic thinking.
Oh, yeah, that motivation piece is huge.
It is. And then to bookend the issue, they had Burns and Dunbar's article on the nature and development of this kind of thinking at the beginning, and Murphy and colleagues' piece on promoting critical analytic thinking at the very end.
It's like they were intentionally trying to create a sense of coherence across all these different voices. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are the big takeaways? What should we remember about how the experts are thinking about critical analytic thinking?
Well, first off, it's clearly super important, both for education and for society. But nailing down a precise definition and figuring out the best ways to measure it, that's still a work in progress. It's complex. And we've seen how all these different factors play a role. Cognitive abilities, brain development, social interactions, motivation, environment, it's all interconnected.
It's not just about teaching a set of skills. It's about understanding this whole intricate ecosystem of influences.
Right. And that's why this gathering of experts was so valuable. It was a step towards building a more unified understanding of what critical analytic thinking is and how it works. It gives us a framework for thinking about how to support its development in a more holistic way.
And it's a reminder that even the experts are still figuring things out, which in a way is really empowering for the rest of us.
Absolutely. If the top minds in these fields are still grappling with these questions, it means it's okay for all of us to keep questioning, to keep striving for deeper understanding in our own areas of interest. It's a journey, not a destination.
And that's what makes it so exciting. It's a constant process of learning, analyzing, evaluating, and refining our thinking. So as you go about your day, as you encounter new information, as you make decisions, ask yourself, how are those different pieces we talked about, evidence, effort, environment, showing up in your own thinking? It's something to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.